Between 2002 and the 19th of August 2021, Erik Feld had got 10 convictions for 18 offences. In 2012, he pled guilty to sexual assault, battery, possession of an offensive weapon, and criminal damage. All of those named offences dated back to just one incident, on the 26th of June 2011. It was about 20 past 3 on the London Underground. Erik grabbed a woman's breast at the exit of Stepney Green Station. Then about 10 minutes later, on an eastbound district line, he brandished an axe at passengers, pushing it into their faces and threatening them. At about 3:45 on a different eastbound district line, he sprayed black paint on his face and then sprayed the word kill on a carriage window. Obviously, the other passengers were very frightened. They didn't know what to do, they didn't know what was happening, and they didn't realise if they were in danger or not. He got off the train at Bromley by Bow Station, and then he tried to force his way back onto the train. When the police arrived, he was banging his head and shouting profanities. I don't know how long he got sentenced for, but he did get sentenced, and while serving time in prison, he was transferred to a secure mental institution. While in that institution, in 2016, he confided in a psychiatrist, saying, "I used to go out with a hammer, screwdriver, or razor blades, hoping to catch someone unawares. Down alleyways. I would just kill them and leave them. At that time, I was regularly looking at people through windows and following some on the street, feeling envious and jealous when I saw couples and sometimes going out with a weapon in case an opportunity presented itself." I mean, at this point, you're already thinking, wow, this guy's a nutcase, he certainly don't want to be out on the streets. But his phone history would show you that Erik's fantasy of killing a stranger way predated 2016. Erik Feld also had a tendency to collect hammers. Of course, he'd say that they were for DIY jobs, but they were for more than that. He was fascinated by them. He saw them as an ideal murder weapon. One way or another, at some point, Erik Feld was free to walk the streets. He was living on Tredegar Road in Bow, London. And it was in the early hours of Monday, the 16th of August, 2021, that he came across 50-year-old Ranjith Kanamalij. They were both walking in Tower Hamlets Cemetery Park in East London, which is both a park and a graveyard. At night, this park is a very secluded place. It's not lit, and it doesn't have CCTV. Throughout the park, there's extensive areas of trees, dense undergrowth, interspersed with gravestones. In fact, Erik's description of this park claims that it's a creepy, gothic, and monochromatic place at night. Throughout a typical night, the park would be visited by all sorts of different people, doing different things. Some people were just passing through, either on way to a night shift, on way back from a night shift. Some people would use a park to just chill out and drink. It were a place that students went to. Others would use a park to take drugs. And it's also known as a place that men would meet up to do adult things under the cover of darkness. In all, at night, this park is a creepy and dark place, with plenty of people passing through it, but never too many people at once. So it sounds like an ideal place that would fit Erik's fantasy quite well. So we all know exactly why you were there, with a claw hammer. As for Ranjith, nobody knows why you were there. He was gay, so it is possible that he was on the scene that night. However, it's also possible that he was just passing through, or doing absolutely anything else. However, I can say that the defence really wasn't shy about suggesting that he was there to meet other men. Regardless of why he was there, he did have the misfortune of encountering Erik Feld in the park. But before we get into it, let's do the disclaimers. This is a true crime case. It involves real people, and them real people have real families. So if I want you to share it and comment, please do be sensitive while you do so. Now, this case is already sounding a lot like the one we covered the other week with Dion Timms Williams, but there is a major difference here. Erik Feld didn't attack Ranjith because of his sexuality. In this case, it seems very much like it doesn't matter who Erik encountered that night, their fate would have been the same. It wasn't much longer after their paths had crossed that a member of the public just passing by found Ranjith in the park, and he was in a really horrific way. We'll get to that later. Obviously, they formed emergency services and they came and attended to Ranjith. Although, again, as you'll find out later, it was way too late for Ranjith. He didn't stand a chance. So now, while police are desperately trying to find out who murdered Ranjith in this park that's not very well lit, it's not got any CCTV, they're desperately trying to find any leads they can. 2 days after the murder, Erik went to a Poundland shop in East London. A security guard suspected that Erik was shoplifting, so he approached him, and an argument broke out not long after Erik left. But Erik then came back a little while later. He stood outside the shop, he got a claw hammer out of his rucksack, and he started shouting, "Come out." Obviously the police arrived and he was arrested, and on the 19th of August he pled guilty to a fray with the possession of an offensive weapon at East London Magistrates Court. And that was that. For another 5 months. It was on the 21st of January 2022 that Erik Feld was arrested again. This time it had nothing to do with the Poundland incident or any new incidents. The police and the forensics had found DNA under Ranjiv's fingernails matching Erik Feld's DNA. At this point, police had already collected CCTV that followed Ranjiv from his house all the way to the park. Obviously they didn't catch him going into the park, but they catched him going towards the park. His last sighting heading towards the park was at 5 minutes to 4 in the morning. With Erik now being the lead suspect, they also got footage of him walking away from the park at 13 minutes past 4. They also managed to trace him all the way back to his house. And that means that attack lasted less than 20 minutes. The last sighting of Ranjiv before he entered the park, on his way to the park, was at 5:02, and the sighting of Erik leaving the park, or after leaving the park, was at 13 minutes past. That's 18 minutes, and within that 18 minutes, they had to cross paths. In court at the Old Bailey, a pathologist explained that Ranjiv had been hit on the head with a claw hammer at least 12 times, in what was clearly a frenzied attack. At least 3 of those blows were severe, with severe force used. So much so, not only did they shatter his skull, they also made their way to the brain. Any single one of these blows would have rendered Ranjiv unconscious before leading to his death. But Erik delivered 3 equally fatal blows. And that's at least 3, by the way. The injuries were that bad, the paramedics at first glance thought they were gunshot wounds. And they weren't the first blows either. Ranjiv did have defensive injuries to his arms and to his hands, which showed that he initially tried to shield himself. Now, you'll have to let me know if you've ever done this, because it sounds so extremely unlikely to me. But Erik said the reason he took the hammer to the park at the very early hours of the morning was to hit trees with them to relieve stress, or to relieve tension, because he couldn't sleep. Now, I mean, if you need to hit things to release tension, I can think of a dozen different plausible things to hit. Maybe even go to the gym. But I don't think I've ever seen anyone in a park hitting a tree, let alone with an hammer. To start with, Erik outright denied his involvement in the murder. But after he was told that his DNA had been found under Ranjiv's fingernails, and that matched him to 1 in 1 billion, he started to change his story. He offered no reply in interviews, but he submitted a defence case statement in which he said he acted lawfully in self-defence when killing Ranjiv. Now, if you don't know, in the UK, we have a thing called reasonable force. And that basically means if you attack me, I'm allowed to use reasonable force to defend myself. I mean, in comparison to other countries, that reasonable force is very, very limited. And if you accidentally cause death within that reasonable force, there's a good chance you're going to go to prison for manslaughter. But with that post-mortem, it really doesn't matter how limited our self-defence is. Ranjiv was unarmed. There was no way this was reasonable force. And even if Ranjiv were armed, there is no way these 3 extremely fatal blows could ever be deemed as reasonable force. According to Erik, he came across the man in a park. He was thinking he was going to get attacked with a weapon, so he hit Ranjiv on the back of the head with a hammer. He also claimed that Ranjiv had made a pass at him. He said he swung out with the hammer several more times after he was pushed and pinned to the ground because he was unable to shake the man loose. Then after weakening the man's grip, Erik said he pushed him off, got to his feet and ran to the exit of the park. Erik was interviewed by a psychiatrist in April and May 2022, and then again on the video link on the 5th of May 2023. The psychiatrist reported a well-established diagnosis of personality disorder. And although I previously mentioned it was agreed in court by all parties that this wasn't an attack motivated by Ranjiv's sexual orientation, Erik apparently expressed deeply offensive homophobic comments via outburst rants about Ranjiv while being cross-examined. Other evidence came from his phone. Now, when he was arrested, he refused to give the police his phone PIN number, which is an offence in the UK as it is. But they managed to get into his phone anyway. And they found Google searches including FBI definition of serial killer, murder footage, and murder videos. I know, as true crimers, them sorts of searches aren't all that damning. But he also visited numerous web pages with thumbnails and videos consisting of real-life graphic and extreme footage. This consisted of people being murdered, and guess what? The vast majority of the time, these murders were done with a hammer. These real-life pictures and videos were too graphic to be shown to the jury. But not only that, the descriptions were also too graphic to be shown to the jury. So the parts that were deemed to be too graphic were pixelated in regards to the thumbnails, and the descriptions summarised in general terms. One of the most graphic ones were viewed by Erik only 3 days before he murdered Ranjith. Between the 16th of January 2021 and the 13th of August 2021, he used the term hammer to search thumbnails and videos. And to show you how intensely throughout that month they were looking, between the 4th and the 5th of August 2021, so you're talking 24-hour, 48-hour time frame, he searched that 5 times. Some of the less graphic content he found was hammer to the head murder, ends discussion, death by hammer, back of head, and female bludgeoned to death with hammer. An extremely incredible thing about this footage that's too graphic to be shown to the jury is that it was found on the clear web, not the dark web. The actual general web that you use every day. While searching his phone, police also found 2 photos of Erik Feld holding a claw hammer. Now, if you listen on podcasts, you can't see the images, but these aren't like him holding a hammer doing some work. He's got his hood up, he's posing to the camera with a big smile on his face with his hammer. And with the hindsight of this story, you can really see evil, murderous intent in his eyes. He almost looks like he feels powerful. The photos were taken by Erik in December 2020, and that specific claw hammer in the pictures has never been recovered. He told the jury that he disposed of the hammer that he'd used to kill Ranjith by putting it in the rubbish in his flat. But as I said, this is a guy that collects hammers, and it seems that his hammer collection's constantly rotating. When he was arrested 2 days after he murdered Ranjith for the Poundland incident, his flat was searched. And during that search, the police found 2 mallets and a sledgehammer in his hallway cupboard. A 3rd mallet was also found in his living room cupboard, all of which were confiscated. Then, when he was arrested another 5 months later for Ranjith's murder, a further hammer and a cutthroat razor were found by his bed. During his interviews with the psychiatrist, they asked Erik why hammers, and he explained that he saw them as being easy to come by, easy to use. While on remand for Ranjith's murder at Belmarsh prison, he wrote a note which he gave to a supervising prison officer, who in turn passed it to the governor. Amongst other things relating to other prisoners, the note said, "They're triggering my moods that led to my index offence, committed against an unknown man." Now obviously by index offence, it means the random killing, and this is an admission before his court case. He also said the prison wing was irritating me to the extreme, and I'm fantasising killing one of these pieces of shit. Now I know this bit's going to make the comments go mad, because not only was he watching things online, but it was also reported to the court that he would buy kittens to, well, he'd buy kittens to use his Amazon. Despite Erik initially saying that he had nothing to do with it, and then claiming self-defence, it took the jury just 3 hours and 23 minutes to unanimously find him guilty of murder. So you know what that means. The only applicable sentence is a life sentence. The judge deemed that it wasn't serious enough to warrant a whole life sentence, and because it's deemed that it wasn't motivated by Ranjith's sexual orientation, it wasn't a 30-year starting point either. However, Erik did take the hammer to the scene, so the judge agreed with the prosecution and the defence that the starting point for the minimum term should be 25 years. The aggravating factors were the premeditation, because he'd actively gone out then and in the past looking for a victim. The extreme violence used. The victim was a stranger in the park, which is a multi-layered one. It's basically saying that Ranjith was to some degree vulnerable and that there was very little chance of anybody coming to help him. The final aggravating factor was that Erik had relevant previous convictions. The only mitigating factor was his personality disorder, and although that does lower his culpability, it didn't lower it to the extent that it lowered his ability to understand the nature of his conduct. So on the 14th of June 2023, at the Old Bailey in London, 38-year-old Erik Feld was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 28 years. Now, almost everything I could find I've already told you, so I couldn't find any more on Erik, and I could only find a little bit about Ranjith, so I'm going to tell you that now. He had an ex-wife and 2 children in Sri Lanka. He also had an ex-civil partner in the UK. And I'm now going to read you a victim impact statement that the prosecution read to the court. It's from Ranjith's daughter on behalf of herself, a mom and a younger brother, who, by the way, was watching the video link from Sri Lanka. He loved us more than his own life, and we were the most precious things in his life. To further his studies, he went to the UK in 2009 and completed 2 degrees. Life was not easy for my father in the UK. He had to work day and night to provide for us. After those 12 years of sacrifice, he was going to apply for citizenship, but postponed due to the start of the pandemic. His aim was to apply for an accountancy position at a UK bank, but before his dreams came true, he was brutally murdered. Now, I can't fulfill my dreams for my wonderful father, who I loved so much. He was a very kind person, respected and treated all people equally. We miss our father every time we see his photo. We miss his calls every night. We want to tell him how much we miss him. We would sacrifice everything just to see him one more time. Another part of that statement said, he was a senior bank manager in Sri Lanka, a very accomplished athlete who won gold medals. She also described him as her best friend. His former civil partner said, this was such a cruel and cowardly act on a gentle and kind man who was just chilling in the park. And that's all I've got for you. Sorry, it's a short one, another short one. It's a very recent case, so there'll probably be more information come out in the future, and maybe not. You know, it wouldn't surprise me because of the way Erik Feld is, that some TV documentary don't take it and run with it. Which, to be fair, I'm very sceptical of them anyway. They seem to portray things to fit a narrative. And I have wrote a massive rant about the way that this case has been portrayed by both the police and the media. But I've decided I'm going to leave that out. I don't want to focus on politics. And that leaves me with nothing else to say. Because there's not very much we can learn as individuals about this case. There's nothing we can learn to protect ourselves. Although it is incredible to me that in hindsight, this seemed so inevitable. He told a psychiatrist that this is what he used to do. Were it not then foreseeable that he might do it again in the future? Now, I'm totally pro-freedom. The idea of putting laws in place to restrict my freedom and everyone else's freedom in the name of safety really does gripe on me. I don't think I, as a law-abiding citizen, should be surveilled and limited in my freedoms just because I could be a serial killer. It doesn't make sense without reasonable cause. But I do often think of that because there is a grey area. And don't get me wrong, when it comes to freedom, I am pretty much very black and white. But there is a grey area. How much freedom are you willing to sacrifice, if any, to make sure this doesn't happen again? So the only thing that I could actually come up with was surely there should be some more type of provisions, some sort of parole in place for people like Erik Feld, where it's admitted that he used to go around with an hammer, with a blade, looking for a random victim to kill. Or not necessarily looking, but hoping an opportunity would present itself. Surely then it's obvious, in my mind, that this person isn't safe to be in public. I mean, it's obvious to me. If somebody said, look, this is what I used to do, I wouldn't really want my loved ones to be around them at night time, you know? So maybe a longer parole, a longer licensing should be placed on people like Erik Feld that have got a risk to the public. Maybe even a X amount of time where the digital communications are monitored. Again, I don't think everyone should have the digital communications monitored continuously forever, but for someone like him that's got these fantasies in his head, surely it should be checked out and fully vetted that he's not slathering these thoughts and fantasies. I don't know, I get myself in knots when I think about things like this. So let me know what you think down in the description. My love goes out to Ranjith's family, obviously. It is such an absolutely awful position to find yourself in. All I'm saying is, I love you. Take care of yourself, take care of those around you, and I'll see you next week. Bye.